It's my favorite time of the year, earnings season. Just kidding. Fall's my favorite time of the year, then Christmas, then Thanksgiving, then earnings season. And yesterday, GM announced their Q1 of 2022 earnings, and they also adjusted their guidance for the rest of the year. Let's first go over the facts, and we'll talk about what this means for General Motors and what this means for the entire car market. GM beat expectations for earnings per share by quite a bit, by 29.47%, and they also beat revenue expectations as well by 1.54%. The expected earnings per share were $1.71 per share. The reported earnings per share were $2.21 per share. But despite the 11% increase that GM saw with revenue, it wasn't all roses when it comes to their financials. GM did see an 18.5% decline in profit this quarter over the same quarter last year, and GM's profit margin fell by 26.8%. GM Financial, which is GM's financial arm that does financing for vehicles, saw a 40% decline year over year, and GM's China and Asian market tanked both by income and deliveries. In fact, in Q1 of 2022, GM delivered 1,349,000 vehicles to the China and Asia market, while in Q1 of 2023, they only delivered about 1,034,000. GM's overall market share declined as well from 9% to 8.6%. A few other key components of the earnings release that were not quite as financial focused is that General Motors was ranked number 1 in fleet sales and number 1 in commercial sales here in the United States. And they ranked number 2 in electric vehicle sales right behind Tesla. They sold 20,000 units in Q1 of 2023. So Tesla is quite a ways ahead, but the fact that they are number 2, beating out makers like Ford, is quite a big deal. Now, if you look up news articles about these earnings, you will almost without a doubt find headline after headline talking about how great these earnings were for General Motors. And sure, whenever you look at things like earnings per share or revenue, GM did perform quite well. But the thing is, revenue and earnings per share is just one small piece of the puzzle whenever it comes to the overall health, performance, and future of an automotive brand like General Motors. And whenever you read these headlines talking about how great General Motors performed, well, it really doesn't paint the full picture. Because whenever we look at how General Motors performed this quarter compared to this time last year, there's a growing trend across automakers and their financials. And this is something that Wall Street and mainstream news articles are simply not talking about. And that is the fact that sure, General Motors beat earnings expectations, they saw an increase in their revenue, but they saw a sharp decline in almost every single metric that actually measures profitability. So while GM's revenue is in fact rising, their profit is actually declining. And this could be due to a few different things. Sure, GM may be selling the same number of cars as they sold last year. In fact, here in the United States, they did increase their deliveries from 513,000 to 603,000. But GM and other automakers are making less per car. And this could be because of higher cost. It's more expensive to produce a car than it was this time last year. It could also be because of lower demand. People are less inclined to buy cars, and so those that do need to be incentivized through things like discounts, or alternatively, it could be due to the increase in supply. And thus, even if demand is the same, there are more cars on the lot, which means buyers have more negotiating power. And to be honest, I think not only in the case of General Motors, but in the case of most dealerships and automakers today, I think it's a little bit of all three of these. In fact, we know that supply issue is a factor because dealership inventory has nearly doubled year over year from 274,000 in Q1 of 2022 to 412,000 in Q1 of 2023. So revenue is up, income is up, production is up, but profit is down. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think that these earnings are bad. I'm just pointing out the fact that this is a growing trend that we're beginning to see with automakers. And truthfully, whenever it comes to these earnings, GM seems quite confident with where their earnings currently stand. With the release of their earnings, General Motors provided a clear path to doubling revenue in the next 10 years. They feel good about where they stand with electric vehicles, and the CFO of GM said that they have no plans to discount cars like Tesla has. So as far as GM, things are going as well as they could. And on the release of these earnings, GM even announced that they plan to increase expectations for 2023, which means that GM has valid reasons to believe that they'll actually perform better than what they're leading on. But what this earnings season is continuing to show us is the fact that automakers are simply not making the money that they were this time last year or in years prior after the pandemic, and demand is simply not where it used to be. And while these earnings are quite good for GM, they are showing a negative trend with the overall car market, which is really good news for consumers. At the end of the day, GM seems really confident with where their earnings are in relation to the overall car market. And I think that this is a really interesting dynamic, especially whenever you compare it to a company like Tesla, where Tesla, love or hate them, GM, love or hate their price cuts, these price cuts that they've been implementing over the last few months definitely give off the image that Tesla is a little bit shaky on their feet. Tesla certainly doesn't come off as confident with their financials or as confident with their product as General Motors, which is why Tesla is cutting their prices left and right. Whereas GM is taking the exact opposite approach, raising expectations and standing by their current pricing model. But there are a lot of uphill battles that will continue, from a slowing economy and thus a slowing demand, an increase in inventory, crashing car prices, high interest rates, and more. Overseas, we have a growing number of strong competitors, specifically out of China, and a great example is BYD, which I would guess has a large role in GM's declining Chinese market share. There are simply a lot of factors at play, and to be honest, none of these factors have any inclinations that they're slowing down anytime soon. One thing I do want to mention is that though General Motors does seem confident in their decision making, it doesn't mean that their decisions aren't met with controversy. GM recently announced that they would be discontinuing Apple CarPlay in all of their future vehicles, which was met with massive pushback.
Why are they doing it? Well, the thought here is that they are going to have access to more data in terms of where you're driving, and also some of that charging data for the EVs. Now, this is a big reversal for GM, who went all in on Apple CarPlay just a few years ago. Right now, Apple CarPlay, as well as Android Auto, really lets drivers bypass a car's infotainment system. Potential backlash here, what's going to be discussed is that maybe it could alienate some iPhone users because people who have used CarPlay absolutely love it.
As an iPhone user, I can understand the pushback. And just yesterday, it was announced that the Chevy Bolt EV and EUV will be discontinued this year. Once again, a move of an automaker discontinuing an affordable entry-level car.
We have progressed so far that it's now time to plan to end the Chevrolet Bolt EV and EUV production, which will happen at the very end of the year. When Orion EV assembly reopens in 2024 and reaches full production, employment will nearly triple and will have a company-wide capacity to build 600,000 electric trucks annually.
In the case of the Bolt EV, it was one of the more budget-friendly options on the market for electric vehicles, so this is a pretty low blow for anybody who was looking for an electric vehicle on a budget. It'll be really interesting to see how these earnings shake out for General Motors for the rest of the year and how they compare to these new expectations that the company has set. If I was a betting person, I would bet my money on the fact that the cost of cars will continue to go up, while supply will continue to go up and demand will continue to go down. And that is not going to be good news for automakers' profit margin and could continue this trend of higher revenue with lower profit. But ultimately, only time will tell. Like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it. So make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell. And I will see you guys in the next video.